everybody. I'd like to thank everybody for being here to celebrate Dad's life with us. The last few days has been a lot of interesting stories and memories coming out that I know with the different age that we have in our family that some of us didn't know earlier and some of us didn't know from later on. So it's been really nice reminiscing and it's great seeing everybody here. We put together a eulogy with everybody's memories and stuff, but luckily we had Barb to kind of polish things over. I don't know where she is right now, but there she is. So made it sound a little better. So anyways, Lori's going to take it from here and yeah, enjoy the stories.
I want to keep this mic and that mic close. He's my friend. So Dad was, I'm Lori. I'm the third daughter of Jerry and Connie. So Dad was the oldest son of Agnes and Isidore Puetz. He had older sisters, but he was still a big brother through and through. I'm sure there were many chores that fell on him as the oldest son. He talked about how much he enjoyed spending time with the hired men on his parents' farm. Especially enjoyed helping around the farm when Uncle Alex Westling was around. When he talked about smoking, he would say that he started smoking because Uncle Joe Doppler told him, well, if you're going to work like a man, you better smoke like a man. But I think Dad was like 10 years old. But Dad enjoyed farm life. He loved driving and fixing on the tractors and equipment. He learned to weld and worked as a welder at Depker Industries in the winter months. Around this time, Dad met Mom at a dance at the Silver Dome in St. Gregor. Soon after, they met again at a wedding dance in Anaheim, and he took the opportunity to ask her out on a date. Mom was attending the Ursuline Academy at Bruno. Back then, the students were only allowed visitors one Sunday per month. Dad wasn't one to get too worked up about rigid schedules. So if he decided to visit Mom on an off Sunday, he would bring some ice cream for the sisters, and then he would ask if he could just have a little visit with Connie, since he was already there. Dad and Mom got married in July of 1964. At the time, Dad was driving a car that was in some sort of accident. Instead of taking the insurance money and hiring a mechanic, he fixed that car himself and used the money to take his new bride on a long honeymoon in the United States. Shortly before their first anniversary, Debbie, their first daughter, was born. Before their second anniversary, Donna, the second daughter, was born. And then just before their third anniversary, I was born, the third daughter. They had a little reprieve for about 3 years before their fourth daughter, Linnell, came home. That must have been exhausting. But Dad bought a 1949 semi-trailer unit and started doing some custom hauling for farmers in the surrounding areas. I remember as a young kid, I rode along with him and was totally amazed by how easily he could move that stick on the floor, which I now know is called a gear shift. I loved watching him drive that truck. I'm almost certain Mom would get Dad to take us along with him so she could have a little break. But we never minded riding shotgun because road snacks were always good. Thanks, Mom. I specifically remember a time when Don and I were riding along with him. We were driving up a steep, muddy hill, I think. Donna was leaning against him as she fell asleep. I can still see Dad trying to nudge her away from his side while he was busy shifting gears. Dad was a very good driver. Well, after about a 6-year break, along came baby number 5, Michael. I wouldn't consider Dad a chauvinist, but I am pretty sure he was relieved he now had a child he could pass on all his talents, and probably a lot of tools too. Dad now had another child who was usually pretty eager in riding shotgun. Up until then, Linnell had been his #1 farmhand. 3 years later, Mom and Dad brought home their 5th daughter, Marlene. Marlene completed the family and completely built the house. I have many memories of being up in Dad's arms, along with 2 or 3 of my sisters. His arms and his lap were never too full. Actually, I am pretty sure that was Dad's motto through life: there's always room for one more. Our home was a busy place, but we often took family vacations. All 8 of us would load up into the station wagon and head off to BC or Alberta to visit relatives. Can you imagine how excited all the auntie and uncles were when we arrived?
So I'm just going to share one little memory that I have. So Dad liked to go camping and with grandparents and relatives. And I remember, I believe it was after Pitt's reading, I'm not exactly sure when. But as Lori said, Dad was a really good driver. And Dad welded some sort of contraption so that he could pull the tent trailer and the boat behind the station wagon, the 8 of us in, or however many there were at that time. And I'm not exactly sure what happened, if we took a wrong turn or something, but what we had to do was stop and turn around on this gravel road. And so Dad just asked us all to get out of the vehicle, and he stayed in, and we just watched, thinking this was just a normal thing to do. He just drove down the ditch with his train of camper and boat, down with the ditch, back up and around, and got back onto the road and turned the other side. And we just thought this was all normal, but I remember, as we said, the city relatives at the time were just like, what? What is going on here? And we just thought, that's just what all dads did, just drive like that. Here.
Dad had a vintage 8mm video camera. We went on vacations. We never went on a vacation or had special events without that camera. As young kids, we always knew when Santa was coming because Mom would come down the hall with those blinding moose antler lights on the camera while Dad was always out doing chores. And our Santa had several white sacks. He always carried a big stick. And he took great pleasure in making everyone, including the aunts, the uncles, the grandparents, kneel down and pray before we got our gifts. You remember that, don't you? Yeah. And then Dad was always so disappointed when he'd come back in and miss Santa again. We always liked it when Dad went shopping or he had to go to Saskatoon. There were always treats for his kids when he returned. There was a new flavor of ice cream or some special store-bought cookies. And I really think they were called Dad's cookies for a reason. Lots of summers, Mom would take all of us to Greenwater Lake for swimming lessons. Dad would drive us all up and help us all get settled. Then he would return home to work, leaving Mom on vacation. It would be a really tough week for him, eating cornflakes, toast, and ice cream every single day, while Mom was, busy relaxing at the lake with 6 hungry, sunburned children. Raising 6 kids, I'm sure, wasn't always easy. We always had everything we needed. But the list of things that we wanted was also long. And Dad did his best to keep us all happy. As kids, we wanted him to take us to Disneyland. But he took us to Princess Auto, and to him, that was Disneyland. Dad seemed that he could fix anything. We always thought, if Dad can't fix it, nobody can. Dad loves his gadgets and was excited when one of them could be used daily. In recent years, a couple of his favorites were his grabber and the thing that helped him put on his compression socks. My daughter-in-law thought it was kind of a funny story that he went into great detail about how that thing was used, but she later understood its value when she was 8 months pregnant and tried to put on her own socks. Dad sang in the Mary's Choir for many years. He'd often continue to sing whatever songs he liked all Sunday long. Sundays were usually a day of fun at our house. And the songs we picked today were all of his favorite songs. Dad taught Mike to drive at such a young age that Mike actually can't remember a time that he didn't drive. When Mike was 6 years old, he taught me how to drive a grain truck. He was so young he couldn't stand. He was so young he needed to stand because he couldn't reach the pedals. Mike remembers getting into many arguments with Dad because at the age of 14, Dad forgot he was dealing with a very experienced driver.
So I just had a couple memories I wanted to share. Some of my vivid childhood memories were Sunday mornings, and we'd be walking out to the car, and it would be muddy on the driveway, and Dad would scoop me up in my Sunday dress and my shoes so I wouldn't get dirty. And I remember vividly the day that he said, "Sorry, Marlene, you're too big. I can't carry you anymore." But it's a very fond memory of being held by your father. And another special memory, and I don't think it happened very often. I think I was usually at home with Mom or the girls, but there was a couple of occasions where nobody was home to babysit me, so I just went and sat in the Versatile, and I had, I don't know how, a Versatile coloring book, and I could color, and I'd have snacks that Mom had sent, or Dad would just cover me up with his coat, and I'd have a nap. So I remember vividly those memories, and they're really special. But anyways, I'll hand it back to the professional.
So, fire, faith, and farm were just a couple of the F words that we grew up with. We all can remember burning stubble. Dad would collect dish soap containers, fill them with gas, and then get us kids to help him lighting the rows of straw. It seems almost unbelievable now, but can you imagine a bunch of children running around a burning field of dry straw with a squeeze bottle of gasoline? Farm kids were different back then, though. And his safety briefing, if you got one, was if fire comes up the stream, keep squeezing or throw it and run. I also remember a time I was pushing the lawnmower on a hot summer day with, my transistor radio strapped to my belt, my headphones over my ears. Suddenly, Dad came speeding into the yard with a load of straw bales on the back of a flat deck trailer. Like I said, Dad was an excellent driver, so I had no reason to question what he was doing, but he was driving very fast and making very big circles in the yard as he yelled at me through the window. Well, I was a self-absorbed teenager watching him, wondering, I don't know what he's doing. I later found out he was yelling at me to get the garden hose because the bales had caught fire, and he was trying to dump them so he wouldn't lose the whole load. And it took a long time for my ears to stop burning, too. Dad's bark was a million times worse than his bite, but trust me, you didn't enjoy the bark either.
Just one of the funny stories I remember, Mom and Dad were always, they wanted to teach us good manners and everything. So one night, I think I was 10, and so I was the oldest, they were like age 5 to 10, we were at home. And this, I think an insurance salesman or somebody comes to the door, he wants to talk to Dad, and so we're like, he's not home, so he went and waited in his vehicle for a while, and then I thought, well, good manners, like Mom and Dad would be really proud if we invited them in, and we made them coffee, so we made them instant coffee, and then the 5 of us sat around the table staring at each other, going, what did you say? So it's quite lucky.
Dad was notorious for having a collection of things that needed fixing. He would sometimes choose the most interesting times to fix them, like maybe an electric turkey carver that had been broken since last Christmas, but the day the company was coming, out came the cardboard and the tools on the kitchen table. And as he fixed the knife, Mom would say, "Really, Jerry? Now you're going to fix that?" Maybe not quite like that, but it was nice. And Dad would say, "But you love this knife, and nothing carves turkey like this knife." So it never made sense to us why we never had a properly functioning toaster. I mean, honestly, if I had a nickel for every time I heard, "Oh, Jerry, didn't you smell that toast burning?" Dad he firmly believed that if you were going to do something, he had to do it right. And that was a guarantee. He made no mention of if or when it got done, but you absolutely knew when he did something, it was done to perfection. Dad loved to learn, and by his 8th grandchild, he even learned to change a diaper. He loved spending time with his grandkids. They all have stories about Grandpa. A few of his granddaughters were having a sleepover at Grandma and Grandpa's farmhouse. Dad loved his condiments, so their fridge was a smorgasbord full of sauces and dips. The girls were playing some sort of game where the loser had to eat a mixture of all those condiments. They thought it was the grossest thing ever, and I could almost bet that Grandpa would have said, "Oh, this is fine, I like this." Dad loved to have the kids experience life on the farm. Taking them for a tractor or combine rides was what he always did whenever he could. He always called that last round of harvest the whoopee round. And the only thing better than finishing harvest before the snow fell was doing the whoopee round with a grandchild in the cab. Dad enjoyed having the grandkids around to teach him about fixing things too. And he was a lot more patient when the wrench holder was a grandchild. It was so awesome to call up Dad and have him come over and help the kids on their science fair projects or whatever that was going on. And I always thought that Dad was in his element when he could help someone. When you called him, he was only too happy to grab his electrical belt and come wire up a hot tub or install a new light. Some of the grandkids' most favorite memories are sitting in the breezeway, shooting the shit about life and relatives they didn't know, while Dad waved around his mosquito zapper thing. There were many stories told out there, and true or embellished, they will never know. When the grandkids were babies, he absolutely loved snuggling them, either reading or telling them stories. Unanimously, the two most favorite memories of all the grandkids were suppers in the field and trips to Dairy Queen. We even had a tailgate supper with Dad while he was in the hospital in Saskatoon. Dad always had his chair in both the living room and at the kitchen table. And it was okay to sit there, but when he entered the room, you'd better skedaddle. So some of Dad's favorite sayings were, "Jiminy Crickets," "I don't give a tinker's damn," "He can go piss up a rope," "Like farting against thunder," and "The fickle finger of fate." There's others. Some of the things that we have all learned from Dad, some of us learned better than others, I guess, how to parallel park, because I've been told I can parallel park as good as a man, but I do not know if that's a good thing. I learned that December 24th is as good a day as any to start your Christmas shopping. I learned you don't mess with the smoker's cigarettes no matter what your motivation. I also learned that pretty bottles don't always contain good alcohol. And not all pies are created equal, but I didn't think onion or raisin pie was all that good, but Dad liked them all equally. Even though he didn't like any of our boyfriends, some of them still became really good son-in-laws. And don't make me tell your dad, it sounded a lot worse than it actually was. We have a few very recent memories of Dad. When we realized that it was time to gather to send Dad home, we were all greeted with, "Oh, hello, sweetheart." He had been struggling for a few days when he asked, "When is this bullshit gonna be over?" His very last words that he spoke were, "Happy birthday, Michael." He passed away on Michael's birthday. The second last thing he said was, "No parties." And Dad, we didn't really do that when we were growing up, and we probably won't do that now.
Thanks. It's been, a lot of tears over the last number of days, but a lot of laughs too, just reminiscing and coming up with all these stories about Dad. And we all had our stories. So, before we wrap up here, I just want to thank everybody for traveling. We have some people that traveled really far and kind of on last notice, and we've had all kind of crazy things happening with flights too. So just so appreciate everybody coming together and helping us celebrate the life of our father. And want to really thank the kitchen staff here for serving us a great lunch here. And Gloria and Megan. We can't thank you enough. Gloria is
we sat there, we all heard some stories about Mike and their son getting into some mischief, and we were prepping, and it was just, you just made us feel so at home and so at ease, and there was so much comfort knowing that you were taking care of our father these last few days. And then Father Lawrence, you just, you know, we all have such fond memories of you when you were, you know, a pastor in Marysburg, and, you know, coming over for Sunday suppers, and I think you've inspired us all. You've always been a little bit of a rebel, and we've always loved that. Yes, and well, you married Tim and I, you married Marlene, and you baptized a number of us, and maybe some of our grandkids, so yeah, so we really appreciate it, and we're so thankful that it worked out for you to be able to celebrate with us here. Okay, so please, let's do a Jerry. Let's eat cake, have a few laughs, enjoy another cup of coffee, yeah, and tell many stories as you want. They don't need to be 100% real, that's okay. Again, let's do a Jerry. And just sit and visit and really enjoy the rest of the day and help us celebrate today. Thank you so much.